Hello, and thank you again for joining me on another great episode of What Sayeth the Crooked Nose. Today is a little bit special for me. I'm actually going to be interviewing somebody who's part of my peer group, right? I talk a lot about Peter Sage, the Elite Mentorship Forum, and Cheri, who I'll be talking with today, is somebody who joined this group with me. And, we started in May of 2022 and did a deep dive into consciousness, psychology, neuroscience, physics, metaphysics, ultimately to get to really the questions, who am I? What's my legacy? And what do I want that legacy to be? And so I expect that this will be a lot of fun for me. I hope that'll be a lot of fun for you to watch as well. And ultimately, again, I never know where these conversations are going to go. And I expect that, I'm in for a treat. And I certainly hope that you are as well. And so thank you so much for tuning in again and enjoy.
Sure, go for it.
Awesome. Cheri, thank you so much for joining me. You and I think, have both been looking forward to this. My intro to this video, I was talking about how, this is a little bit more personal for me because, you were part of my peer group as I jumped into this. And most of the people I've interviewed, I have some understanding of, Peter Sage, Elite Mentorship Forum. And so, glad to have you here. And I'm wondering, can you maybe just take a moment, introduce yourself, tell us a little about what it is that you're doing, and then let's just kind of hop in.
Sure, absolutely. Well, my name's Cheri. I have a degree in marriage and family studies, which kind of brought me to where I'm at now. As I finished that, I thought, do I want to go on and get my master's and become a counselor? And really, it wasn't a good fit for me. And one of the reasons why is because I'm a very forward-thinking person. And nothing wrong with counseling; it's got its place too. But I prefer to work forward instead of spending a lot of time looking back and kind of dredging up stuff. So I started looking into all kinds of stuff, came across coaching, and it was every possible thing that forward thinking, asking really good questions, and the concept that the answers come from within, that I wouldn't be really teaching people. It's like I would be asking questions to where they would be resolving kind of their feelings from within and their thoughts. And so I loved the idea of that. So anyway, so I got certified in coaching, started doing coaching, loved that. Found the Sage stuff years later. I've really enjoyed that. It's just kind of built upon a lot of the stuff that I already, I'm a very growth, as we know this together, but I'm a very growth centric minded person. And so, I think what has led me to where I am is that I want to continue to help other people while still growing myself and being able to contribute to, I have 5 kids, been married 40 years, and, I want to contribute to that aspect of my life too. So, as you're learning things and you delve in and as you grow and you have that kind of growth centric curiosity about life and how to improve, you can't help but affect everybody around you, which that's kind of my jam. It's kind of my thing.
I like that. And, you live in Idaho. Yeah.
Yep.
And, the culture there is very, very similar to the culture here in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And, one thing that I found very interesting is that, you belong to, you go to an LDS church and you're a member too. Is that correct?
Yep. Correct.
And so when I first started my spiritual path, I didn't realize that where I was being taken is exactly where I needed to go. I started fellowshipping with the Highland Lake Ward here in Utah, meaningless, I'm sure, to you as far as the name.
Right.
But what it did for me going to a church that I didn't belong to,
Mm-hmm.
playing with my own ideas of the greatest idea of goodness of which I can conceive, while watching people go up there, and even if I didn't really agree with, and even if I didn't understand, because pretty much if there's a testimonial or somebody's going up to speak, chances are almost everyone who's going up to speak is going to say some approximation of, brothers and sisters, I know in my heart that the Book of Mormon is the one true, word of God. And I
Right.
know in my heart that Joseph Smith is the one true prophet. And I could have easily said, look at these silly guys. They say that this is their personal testimonial, but then how can it be personal if it's somebody else's? But instead, I started playing this game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's based off of Jordan Peterson saying, hey, just if somebody can't articulate their point well, does that actually mean that they don't have a point to articulate? I was like, oh, wow, well, that's
Mm-hmm.
interesting. So as I was listening to this, I was thinking, well, here I am playing with my highest ideals of goodness. Well, that's what they're doing. And they're playing with their highest ideals of goodness. And even if it doesn't necessarily make sense to me, it immediately humanized them. And, I grew up with a very antagonistic relationship with, myself and the LDS culture. I, was very secular. And so I had
Mm-hmm.
a real problem there. And I didn't realize that by playing that game and humanizing them would actually start healing my own soul and letting go of the baggage that I had. And it was fascinating going up and just speaking my own testimony of my own
Mm-hmm.
highest ideals of goodness. People were like, Joseph Smith is what's it. And I'm like, yo, Gandalf is what's it. And
Yeah.
and people loved it. They really loved my ideas. They were very welcoming. They were very respectful. And it did a lot for me. I'm still not a
Yeah.
member. I still don't believe in the dogma, but I believe in the people. And
Mm-hmm.
that helped me a lot. Have you found anyone in, whether it be your church or your community, where maybe they've had a similar experience?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of what you're saying, I think in any faith, any organized faith, religion, spirituality, whatever, whatever you want to label it. Um, I think the people that you're describing are in every congregation. I think sometimes when people look at organized religion, it's an all or nothing kind of mentality that people have, that everybody there that's sitting there with a butt in the seat is believing all the same things, has full understanding of the doctrines associated with that particular faith. And the reality of it is there's not one person sitting there that has it all down, that understands all the doctrine, that isn't asking questions about something. And as we both know, one of the things that comes up in EMF is I'd rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. And I think in any faith, any spiritual realm, anything, you should be able to ask questions. And that is one of the things I actually really enjoy about the LDS faith, is that you're very encouraged to study on your own. You're encouraged to find your own answers. You're encouraged to ask questions. Where in other things I've looked into, it's like you believe it because the person said it, and God says it's this way. And if you believe in a loving, caring God, universe, however you want to deem it, that's not the way I feel like love operates. So I think being curious and wanting to understand more, part of that is so many times I think we get involved in what I would call tradition. And there's tradition and culture, I think, in every organized faith, in every club, in every whatever. And I think one of the important questions to ask is, why am I doing what I'm doing? Am I doing this because a good Christian does this, or a good person in this club would lead in this way? And so to me, that's one of the starters. One of the great questions to ask is, why am I doing what I'm doing? And really being able to come to terms in your own soul about what is motivating you and prompting you to do the things that you're doing. But yeah, I think there's those kind of people that have I know people in my own faith. I've gone through things where I'm like, I do not get that. And I just don't know if I understand it. But I don't understand it, don't necessarily buy into it. Over time, I've gained more understanding, or I'm sitting in the same spot and I still don't have understanding and I still don't get it. And I understand that understanding, life is a journey. It's a process, not an event. And so I understand that I will continue to grow and I will continue to learn as long as I continue to ask questions.
Mm.
So I hope that answers that.
Yeah, I like that. And that quote that you mentioned, as far as, I'd rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. What's beautiful about that is that's, from Richard Feynman, a
Yeah.
Nobel Prize winning
Yeah.
physicist. And, this is somebody who, really delved into quantum physics, quantum mechanics. And that's a lot of what we learn in the EMF, with
Hmm.
Peter Sage. And I wonder if, you now going through EMF, if you can see the reason why most people's prayers go unanswered, right? Most people are begging God from this place of scarcity. Please, God, please,
Hmm.
I need this in my life, please.
Hmm.
And if we're praying from a place of scarcity, well, then the only thing that we have to be able to manifest, right? Because what we're energizing, what we're sending out to the field is scarcity. But if we pray to God, knowing that God's going to have our back, right? Because we're God, right? We are a
Hmm.
piece of God.
Hmm.
Everything is God. Well, if we know that the universe has our back, we're praying from a place of, hey, I know it's going to happen because the universe has our back. Well, do you see how that paradigm shift, and how even doing the same things, but thinking and feeling differently, can have radically different results?
Radically different. And one of the main things is when people say, I pray all the time and my prayers aren't answered, what that means is I've prayed for a specific thing, excuse me, and I didn't get it,
Yeah.
or it didn't happen. God can answer your prayers, and he will answer your prayers in due time, whatever timing that is, because we have a concept of earthly time, but there is really no measurement of time. And so, we expect an answer right now in the way that we want it. And I can honestly say there have been times when I've prayed about something and I have gotten an answer, and I've gone back and said, I don't think you understand, but that's really not the answer that I wanted. So could maybe you rethink it? And and usually I get the same answer again. But he does answer our prayers, but many times not in the way we want them answered. And I personally believe he does answer prayers many, many times through other people. I think that is, we are these vessels that he, has a part of. And I think that he uses us as human beings to touch each other, to love each other, to learn from each other, to all of that. And so for me, when someone says God never answers my prayers, I think, well, maybe it's just not happening in the ideal way. I mean, maybe the answer to a prayer comes in the way of a challenge. Well, people would say, well, yeah, I didn't pray for that. I didn't pray for this to be harder, or I didn't pray for this struggle. But in reality, no, maybe what you prayed for was patience. Or maybe what you prayed for is that you would have more compassion and understanding for someone. So he gave you an opportunity through a struggle to learn and be able to view and look at humanity or another person differently. So yeah, that's kind of my take on. And there have been times when I've kind of like, yeah, I don't really know if I want to pray about that, because I might get an answer that maybe I don't really want, but I believe, I see God in everything. I mean, I see it everywhere. I see when I walk around, I see it in little babies. I see it in other humans. I see it in just nature and all of that. I see it in somebody opening a door for someone, or somebody saying, hey, do you want me to get that for you, or whatever. So I think he answers us all the time. It's a matter, are we truly looking for the answers? And are we expecting them to be a specific way?
Can I ask you a potentially controversial question? And it may not be controversial to you.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
God is seen as the creator of all things, but how can the creator be a man?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't the woman
Well,
who gives birth? Isn't the woman the one who
uh-huh.
actually is the act of creation? So if there, let's just say that God exists, and let's just assume that
Mm-hmm.
God exists.
Yep. Yep.
How can God be a man? Assuming that we're going to give it a sex, like wouldn't God come from a feminine energy, which is the source of creation?
Well, in my mind, this is just according to Cheri. So
Yeah.
as I thought about this, I look at the unit of men and women, or the feminine and masculine, however you want to
Mhm.
look at that. Um, to me, I think women are creators, and we have that ability to be able to create life. But I think there is a cohesive energy that happens the same way it takes a man to be able to create life with a woman. I can't believe that woman wasn't somehow involved in that, even if we say God is a man and he created the world. If in fact he had woman with him and we are co-creators here in life, I can't believe that the woman would not have had a part in that. Whether it's mentioned in scripture, whether it's delineated, there's so much that we do not know that is not written.
Right.
I mean, even when you look at the Bible and how it was determined what books would be put in and what would be, there's tons that isn't even there. We don't even know, what all of that says. So, like I said, that's just according to me.
Sure.
But if truly we are co-creators in creating life, I would believe that we would be co-creators in creation. I mean, I think that there has to be a part of a womanly presence in that as well.
Well, there has to be for balance. The
Yeah.
feminine energy is about the inner world, and the masculine energy is about the outer world. And testosterone is the most powerful substance known to man to get people to go out and actually do something, and they get off their butts, and that's going out and affecting the outer world. The problem is, if our inner world's in chaos, whatever we're doing in the outer world is going to be complete chaos as well. If our inner world, right, and we have that feminine, that grounding and that feminine energy, and our inner world is calm and focused, well, then our outer world is also going to be calm and focused. And so you're absolutely right. If we create a schism, right, an unnatural schism between that masculine and feminine energy, well, then things are probably going to fall apart, right? Because we need both. We need to have that harmony, and that harmony is going to be different, for different people. And I love the ideas that people bring up. I love this idea that that you're bringing up. That it seems that your view of God is really a model, and you're not really that interested on whether it's the truth. It's just it works for you, and it helps you align yourself with a greater truth. And that's really what a map does. The map, I look at a map and I realize that I'm not actually on this place on the map. I'm in this place in reality, and the map is helping me get there. But the map is a representation of the truth, and using that map to guide me throughout life helps me orient myself to where I'm going.
Mm-hmm. And really, when you think about it, life really is all about becoming. So if it truly is about becoming where we started, we should be moving further and further from that starting place, learning, growing, maybe taking a step back, then a step forward, then another step forward, then a step back, moving on as we gain more knowledge, as we gain more experience, as we learn more. And so, that's part of the process of, I think, growth in general. It'd be really great if everything could be positive and flowery all the time, but that's not where becoming, it's in the hard stuff that we become something better. And as far as my view of God, of Jesus Christ, of all of that, those beliefs propel me to be my absolute best self. And so for me, it's very effective when I look at, Christ's example of how he dealt with people, how he loved, the depth of which he loved, the lack of judgment, that to me is just a beautiful example of how I want to be as a person. So for me, it's very effective to be able to use that as a model and a person to look to. For me, it's all about, I've thought about it on my headstone when this is all said and done. I've talked to my kids about this. I want it to say, she left the world a better place. And that to me, we've had a lot of loss over the last year where people have passed away. We lost my dad last June, and we lost a very close kind of adopted daughter of ours. I lost a niece that was 35, young. My husband lost his best friend due to a really aggressive form of Alzheimer's at a really young age. And so I've had a lot of opportunity to think about death lately. and the last year especially. And part of what has come out of that, along with everything that I'm studying, is what are we here for? Because you know what? We're all going to bite it in the end. We're all going to die. And so I've got this really what I feel like is a small space to be able to add something positive. And so that is what I want to do with this time, because once I'm in the ground or wherever, life's going to go on for everybody. I mean, they'll be like, oh, bum, I really miss her every once in a while, but life will go on. It's
Right.
not like you're going to make this, even the Gandhis, the Mother Teresa's, they're gone. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Yes, they had a huge impact. So while I'm here, I want to make a difference. I want to make it better in whatever way I can.
Well, and do you think that there's any better way to make a difference than to, one, love what you do, and two, go out and just authentically be you and give everyone else permission to do the exact same thing, to find a path that they love and find a path where they can actually be authentic and no longer, thinking of themselves as the most important while creating a schism, because then they, ironically, people think of themselves as the most important, but they look at others' opinion as more important than their own. And
Mm-hmm.
so it creates this huge divide where they can never be authentic,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm important, but your opinion of me is more important. I mean, how could we ever operate? I mean, how is that anything but chaos? And can you imagine any better gift than to give people permission through the example and the invitation of living your life like, holy crap, I want to live like that girl.
Well, I'll tell you, for me, it comes even before authenticity, and this is my own path.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most important thing that we can do in this life for ourselves and for others is to love ourselves completely. Because if you cannot be authentic, if you do not love yourself and accept yourself for who you are with your imperfections, unless you can recognize that I'm a human that messes up and is going to continue to, but I can improve and I can move forward and I can do better. And I can learn from my mistakes. To me, I could not move into authenticity until I reached that level of self-love. And I could not love others fully until I reached that level of self-love. Because anytime you're criticizing yourself, you're going to be more critical of others. If
Mm-hmm.
you are hard on yourself and you're beating your head against the wall because you're not doing it good enough, you should have tried harder, whatever, I should be this, I should be that, then you're going to look at other people and you're going to make those same judgments. So
Mm-hmm.
to me, before the authenticity, before loving what you do, most important thing you can love to do is to be who you are in loving this person that, I hopped in the shower this morning after I worked out, and my husband came in to the room, and I yelled out to him. I said, isn't it amazing that we can take a warm shower? I mean, isn't that crazy that you can just get up in the morning and hop into a warm shower? And I think of that as we develop love for ourselves, we also learn to appreciate more as we appreciate ourselves more. And to me, that is all of that leads into being authentic, loving yourself. So you're not critical of yourself or others, recognizing you're making mistakes and other people are going to too. And we need to have grace for ourselves and others. And then you start looking at the world and going, man, this is pretty freaking awesome. Even with the hard stuff, you know? So I think it's learning to be authentic in the most kind and loving ways. I think sometimes when people hear the word, I need to be more authentic, or you need to be more authentic, they think it means you need to act like a jerk. That's
Mm-hmm.
not what authentic is. Authentic is, in a loving, kind way, being true to yourself, and like you say, being the invitation to others. Has nothing to do with being a jerk. I think people can totally disagree in a very kind and loving way. They can walk away from the table and be absolutely polar opposites on any topic, but feel no animosity, no guilt, no shame, no anger. you know? So yeah, I think it really comes down, and that is what I see, because I work mostly with women coaching. One of the number one things that they struggle with is love of self, the expectations of feeling like they should be more, they should be doing better. And they're doing amazing things, and they're amazing people. It's one of the things I love in the EMF program, when Peter basically says, I am, and that's enough. And I've said that to myself a few times, many, when I have felt like, oh man, I wish I had, and then I'm like, no, you did the best you could. I am. And that's enough. I'm an imperfect being. That's okay. That was part of the plan. And I'll just keep cruising along, trying to improve.
Well, and in our imperfection, we can be perfect in our imperfection, in that we're a perfect cog, that as we turn other cogs and we interact. And
Yes.
because if we are just a cog by itself, suspended, from that connectedness, well, there's no room to be perfect, because we can spin all we want and we're not going to affect anything. But it's when we plug our imperfections and we lean on others, we offset our weaknesses by leaning on other strengths, and offset their weaknesses by allowing them to lean on our strengths. Well, that's where perfection comes in, because that's where, everything is God. God, I don't see God as like this, this being, or, not to be too snarky, but like a wizard in the clouds, right? I see that everything, God is source. And when source separated out to become every living being, well, now, our soul is that, that spark of light from the source of light. And when we start interacting with more source, well, then, yeah, that's what it's about, is to interact with source and to accept myself. Because if I can't accept myself, you're right, I absolutely cannot, there's no room to accept another. And then I start creating a bigger and bigger shadow. And a shadow is just the absence of light, right? If I stand in the way of light, well, the shadow is not a real thing, right? The shadow is just being cast because I'm now blocking that light. But if I allow the light to be so magnificent, well, then the shadow's no longer there, right? I can now integrate it, because there's no dark sun shining darkness across the world. It's just the absence of light. And most darkness, most evil, most, feelings of unworthiness is a false truth, right? An idea of something that was likely implanted in our heads, right? We experienced something, somebody told us something negative, we accepted it as truth. And now, instead of the experience, we have a picture, a still frame that can never change. It's nearly an obelisk in time, and we beat ourselves up over it. And the worst thing is that even with this still picture, even though our heart knows life is about experience, the mind convinces the heart that this is actually an experience, and it forces the body to experience it over and over and over. But then understanding that, hey, this is just a still frame. And if this is a still frame and I'm experiencing, well, I can let go of that still frame. And I no longer have to allow that to be me. I no longer have to allow that to have control over me. And when we realize this, it starts a really, at first maybe a subtle path, but the more we lean into it, I think the much faster and faster it goes, because, the way that it seems the feedback goes, when we tell the universe, hey, I'm learning, the universe then says, okay, well, let's see what you learned. And when you say, okay, well, I learned that, it says, okay, well, I guess you're ready for a new grade. And it just keeps going and going and going. And, this last year, last 12 months, has definitely helped me understand that Mother Teresa quote, where it's like, I know that God's not going to give me more than I can handle, but boy, do I wish he didn't trust me as much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you're talking about the still frame and these thoughts that we get, or maybe judgments from other people, I have found so much they're self-inflicted judgments. I mean, it's the craziest thing that you can have 10 people tell you 10 wonderful things about yourself, but then you have one person that maybe says something a little off, and that's what you remember. All of a sudden that one person speaks truth, and the other 9 are not valid. You know,
Or
their
disregarded.
thoughts are not valid. So I think it's you know, and as you were talking, I was thinking about just the part that, you know, humility plays in all of this, and sometimes how we take on that thought. Humility is so important because humility is being teachable. But I think sometimes we get the feeling that humble means we can't say, yeah, I'm really good I'm freaking good at that. I mean, that's something I do really well. And the cool thing is to own the good stuff. I mean, own the good stuff and then say, yeah, you know, I'm not so good at that, but you know who is really good at that, you know? I mean, I think of that. Even I'm not a technology person. And I think of the people I reach out to that, I mean, it's like clockwork for them. And I have this admiration of these technology people because I've not put the time and energy into it. And reality is there are just other things that are more important to me. And so I think it's just important to recognize that, yeah, those cogs are turning and you're adding this really amazing thing to the mix. And somebody else is adding another amazing thing to the mix. And somebody else is adding something else. And the reality that we need each other as human beings, that connection that we share as human beings is really, really powerful. And we can draw on each other's strengths at times when we do have weaknesses. It's a beautiful thing that we as human beings truly need that interaction in order to feel just propelled to do better, but in a positive way, not as it in there criticizing me and so I need to make changes. That's, you know, one of the things Peter says too. Motivation is different than inspiration. Motivation is fleeting. Inspiration is what really propels us forward in a way that is really positive. And it's one of the reasons too why we talk about peer group, the importance of peer group and who you hang with. I have surrounded myself with people that inspire me because I know that that will help me reach my own greatness, is being able to talk with people, to challenge kind of my thoughts, to maybe help me look at something a little differently. And so, yeah, I think like you're saying, it's this still frame that sometimes I think we create ourselves, and it's like, let go of it.
Yeah.
You know, and not everybody has to like you or think that you're great. You know, quite a while ago, I was on the freeway and this woman, she was kind of really weaving on the freeway. And I got up beside her and she was on her cell phone. And it just annoys the heck out of me. And part of it is because I have grandkids and kids that are on these freeways. And I think, hang up your dang phone. Don't talk and text while you're trying. She was texting away. So I looked over at her and I went like this, like, hang up your phone, you know? And she flipped me off. And she was annoyed and flipped me off again. And I just kind of looked at her and smiled and waved. And in my mind, I thought, she doesn't even know I'm a nice person. You know, she's flipping me off because she feels challenged. But, you know, used to things like that would be like, hey, I'm nice, you know? Now I'm like, whatever, she's got her own crap going on and, you know, life goes on. But it's just giving people that grace, giving ourselves the grace and knowing that as we work together, even though we don't see the outcome or we may not know why it's going down the way it is, that it can be headed when we're using our good together in really positive ways.
So I like that a lot. And, you know, there was a bit of an example of that yesterday, right? When we met as a peer group,
Yeah.
you know, we were talking about a very sensitive subject. We don't necessarily need to get into that subject.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as we were talking about a, you know, very sensitive subject that, you know, near unanimously, you know, I was one of two guys there and there were what, like 9 or 10 women, and near unanimously, the women, you know, agreed. And because, you know, I'm so drawn to balance, and because I've seen benefit from that thought experiment, I was like, well, okay, well, let's talk about this a little bit. And then, you know, ironically, in a place where we should be able to talk about everything, you know, somebody spoke up and basically told me to shut up. But I didn't need to get mad, right? Hey, I just, you know, and you know, a quote that you like that I, you know, talk about a lot from the Tao Te Ching is, you know, this idea that, you know, if you give evil nothing to resist, will it go away on its own? not because it's not there, but because we can step out of its way. And I
Mhm.
found that not only did that help me in that situation, it was just like, well, hey, it certainly wasn't what I was looking for. And I just kind of dropped it and was
Yeah.
still part of the conversation. But I found that that idea also has helped me a lot with, as I explained to people about how, I'm a remote healer. Most people are like, oh yeah, really? Okay, you're remote. And then when I start talking, they're like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. And so I talk about how, well, think of energy needing to flow just like water. And a great example of that is look at our air. Our air is made up of hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen. I mean, this is all energy. And it flows, it follows fluid dynamics. In fact, if it quits flowing, well, then we call that stale air, and you can taste it, you can smell it, and you don't want to be in stale air. When water quits flowing, well, what happens, right? It starts to pool, and it eventually will start to stagnate. What is attracted to stagnating water? Oh, mosquitoes. And so when mosquitoes come in and they lay their eggs and they start, drawing on people's lifeblood, well, what do? Well, the first thing they do is they start trying to flop their arms around.
Mhm.
And the problem, the reason why that's a problem is because you start doing that and get your heart rate going. Not only does it get your heart rate going, but you start breathing faster. What are mosquitoes attracted to in the
Is
first place?
attracting more.
Our
Mhm.
carbon dioxide. So we're literally making it worse. By us resisting it, we're actually feeding the problem. And energy works the same way. It needs to flow just like water. If it quits flowing and we have a still picture creating a dam, and we're not allowing the experience to flow, well, then the mosquitoes of the energy world come in. And instead of drawing our lifeblood, well, they draw our life force. And our life force is effectively our soul. And if our soul's being drained, well, then since our bodies are a representation of the soul, a hologram, if you will, well, then the body and the mind break down as a natural consequence. But when the life force is at full power, the body and the mind, they heal as a natural consequence. So the point isn't to fight the mosquitoes because it feeds the problem. The point is to invite flow back again, because when flow flows through that stagnating, energy, that stagnating water, well, what does it do? It carries it along with it. So you no longer have to fight the mosquitoes. You step out of the way and allow the flow to take care of it. And then you start working on what's good for you. And, I teach people how they can actually, reclaim their power and recharge that life force. But I found that this idea has been so powerful for me, whether it's being in the moment where somebody is emotional and I don't need to feed that emotional response, or even just explaining what it is that I do as a healer. People are just so drawn to it, and they can feel the truth of this idea and how it actually fits. And you can see them just like, oh, this makes so much sense. But we
Mhm.
often don't allow ourselves to think in mystical ways because we're so caught up in the rat race. Oh, I got to pay my bills. Oh, I got to pay my taxes. Oh, I got to get to work. Oh, I gotta make sure that I'm texting my boss that I'm going to be 5 minutes late as some lady is telling me to, to get off the phone. Right. And
Mhm. Yeah.
then, and then I'm so caught up in this that instead of thinking about, hey, you're right. Here I am driving a murder sled, right. That at 80 miles an hour, completely distracted where I could kill myself or somebody else. I then flip them off as if they're the problem instead of realizing, oh, yeah, you're right. I probably should be paying attention.
Yeah. Well, two things when you were talking that I thought was really interesting. As I watched you practice the very thing you're talking about
Mhm.
yesterday, I found it fascinating and I pondered it the rest of the day. Um, I think in our society, we are way more concerned with proving that we are right
Yeah.
than dispelling negative energy. And I saw that yesterday and thought that it was absolutely fascinating how it just really did just dispel everything. And it wasn't like there was any like resolve,
Hmm.
but it was just dispelled. And I thought that was really interesting. I think too, we don't have to prove we're right to in our heart feel that where we're at is right. Um, and so I thought about that a lot too yesterday. It's like we don't have to speak up and fight for, we don't have to fight for our truth and our right in a way that is abrasive and combative with someone else. And so that was really interesting to watch. The other thing, as we were talking about compassion and being able to understand other people, the only two people that didn't kind of have the same stance were the two men that were in that group. And so I think it would lead someone to ask the question, do you feel differently about a specific topic because you're a man or because you're a woman? And so I think that is one of the beauties too, that you can go, wow, that's kind of crazy. I just don't feel that as a man. It's kind of a more of a woman's issue. That is really interesting that women have that take on it. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And some of it, I think, what we talked about did include a man's perspective too, the very things that you were talking about and that Wallace brought up as far as expectations and that pressure on men to be a certain way also. But I think it is a beautiful thing that shows there are differences between men and women. And it's a beautiful thing to have those two entity, there's man and there's woman, and there's balance that can be created in that, which I think is really, really a beautiful thing. But it gives us the opportunity to look at things differently from somebody else's perspective. It's like, yeah, I'm not, I'm not a woman. I'm never going to be a woman. I'm a man. So I can't fully get in the head of a woman and how she would feel about that. But yeah, let's listen to what's being said. Like you were saying, you listen and you kind of take that in and go, yeah, I can see where that might be disconcerting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I thought, typical example though, that was not a struggle, but you would look at that on the spectrum of maybe something negative. It was not this smooth, just, everybody contributing, that came up and it was uncomfortable. I learned a ton from that little teeny experience. So I think that's a perfect example of how there's bumps in the road and we're like, dang, I don't know why that happened. That was so unexpected or whatever. But you can take something really good from it. You can really learn from that and then apply it later, in your own life.
You know what I love about what you said there, as far as, how I didn't feel the need to like prove myself and just kind of let it go. So another Tao principle, right? Wise men don't try to prove themselves. Men who try to prove themselves are not wise. If we feel this need, but no, you just don't understand. This is why I'm right. Well, that's not a wise person. That's somebody who's stuck on that still picture, and somebody who's more interested in being right than to harmonize. Because at the end of the day, if we harmonize, well, then right things will come about it. That's just the way life works. What another thing I love about that idea of just stepping out of the way of evil and it effectively will go away on its own, that's literally what Jesus did every single time he was confronted. The Pharisees saying, "Hey, bro, which one of these commandments is the best one, dog?" He was like, "Well, okay, well, love God with all your heart." I'm convinced that he meant the God self. He never once said, "Hey, read this book." He never once said, "Hey, follow me." He said, "I'm the way, so do what I do," right? Walk this way, not be Jesus. He never once said, "Be me." He just said, "Walk this way." I am the way, I am the truth, and I'm the light. Well, what's the book of the way? Well, the book of the way is the Tao Te Ching. And so like you can see Jesus literally embodying this ancient wisdom, when Mary Magdalene, right? Mary Magdalene, they're like, "Yo, let's stone this fool." And he's like, he didn't say, "How dare you guys?" And did you call her by her proper pronoun, right? He said, "Okay, all right. Well, if we're going to stone her, let's just make sure that we're all playing by the same set of rules and we're not hypocrites. So since you want to stone her for breaking a commandment, hey, any of y'all who haven't broken a commandment, go ahead and throw it." And they're like, gulp, and start sweating.
Which that is a powerful story.
That is such a powerful story. And then what happened? "Woman, who here confronts you?" No one, my lord." Exactly. And he shows us how we can step out of the way of evil.
Well, and then tells her, I need my charger. He tells her too, which I absolutely loved. He knew what her sin was. He knew what she was doing. You're talking adultery at a time when they stoned you for that. He doesn't get on her, make her feel terrible, shame her, make her feel guilty. He says, "Go thy way and sin no more." Gives her the opportunity to turn her life around. I mean, that's cool. Yeah. That's just such a beautiful example of showing truly Christ-like love. and allowing someone to say, hey, my life is not working for me like this, and there's a better way, and I
Yeah.
can do it,
Yeah. And the sin no more is not because he's coming from a moral judgment, but because if you don't want your life to continue on this way, where you're swarmed by people who may murder you, well, then change what you're doing. Right. And the
Yeah.
thing is, if you love, if you love your neighbor as yourself, you're not going to go and ruin their marriage. You're not going to be a part of that. Right. You're not going to be a part of that adulterous, activity or
Yes.
adulterer activity, for men.
Mm-hmm. And you have no idea what her circumstance was. I mean, you don't know if maybe her maybe her husband was abusive, or maybe, I mean, you don't know what the
Right.
situation was, but it's just this beautiful story of him showing love and compassion for her and letting her know. Mary Magdalene's another just beautiful story too, when you think of where she came from. And he just always says, hey, if you're miserable, there's a better way. And I love it that they call him the light. I mean, the light is one of the names that he is called by in the scriptures many times, because he illuminates. It's like a dark place, and he illuminates. And I just think it's awesome.
Which
And we
also
can be a light
reveals
also.
the
We
way.
can be that same light, which is also
Yeah.
very powerful.
Well, and just like a light, like a street light, right? It
Mm-hmm.
illuminates the path. Well, as he's the light, he illuminates the way. The way in which we should go if we want our lives to be better, right? Because
Yes.
Jesus ultimately represents the ideal of the perfect human. And it doesn't mean that, if we sin, that we beat ourselves up. That's completely missing the point. Because as you just said, about Mary Magdalene, go thy way and sin no more. He didn't say, how dare you? Let me berate you. Let me sit you down and preach to you for a couple hours. He's just like, so now you learned. What did you learn? Okay, well, now go and don't just have that knowledge and do nothing with it, but go apply it. Because
Yeah.
knowledge isn't what's power. Application of knowledge is what is power.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people that have knowledge, what is it? Knowing and not doing is the same as not knowing.
Yep.
I mean, if you can know a lot of things, but if you don't act on what and the reality of it is, I think sometimes people, I think they have the concept of, I need to change, that is a negative thing. That's why I really love the word becoming so much better. Becoming is about change, but becoming doesn't have a negative connotation associated with it. Like, the reality of it is, there's work in becoming also.
Mm-hmm.
But when people say, I need to change, or somebody says, you really need to change that about yourself, I just think becoming is such a kinder, softer word to apply to ourselves and to others, to be able to to be able to also apply that to others, and saying they're becoming also.
Well,
They're in a totally different space, and they're becoming also, and just giving people grace to be able to learn and go as they are on their path, doing the best that they can.
and the caterpillar doesn't beat itself up and like, oh my God, I'm a terrible caterpillar, I better change and become a butterfly. It becomes a butterfly. A sapling doesn't say, oh crap, I'm a terrible version of a tree, I better
Yeah.
change and hurry up and grow into a big tree. No, it grows into the
Yes.
idea of becoming, inherently has built in it the idea of growth, right? That
Yes.
we're not just changing because we arbitrarily think that there's something wrong with us, or somebody who comes from a place of scarcity, and we're triggering that scarcity, and they
Mm-hmm.
immediately project onto us, well, you need to change that about you because how dare you trigger me. We become what's best for us, because when we become what's best for us, we ourselves, right, become that light. I am in he and he is in me, and I am in you also. And
Mm-hmm.
so if he is the light and he is the way, well, when we start becoming, well, we also become the light and we also become the way.
Absolutely. It's the invitation. It's the example and the invitation. That's what it's all about. It's about what this whole walk is about, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And how have you found that that joining EMF, being part of this Peter Sage community, has improved your life?
Well, I have a very long list, but one of the things I'd say it's done is that's triggered just by what we're talking about is created a really powerful peer group. In the world that we live in, it's difficult to surround. I have a lot of great friends, but not all good friends want to talk, deep things or really. And so it's created a forum to be able to discuss a lot of ideas in a way that is very non-threatening and very open. And I really appreciate that. It's absolutely, there's 14 modules in EMF. After module 4, which was mastering emotions, I thought I could walk away from this program. And, I had 10 more modules to go. I could have walked away at that point and felt like it was worth every dime that I invested. Taking the drama out of life, being able to learn how to really forgive and to be able to move forward and to look at the lessons that are involved in hardship. And I've always been, I was really taught, we had really a very, very gracious mother that really taught us to be grateful. And if we weren't going to have, that's just the way it was. She was old school in that way. And her mother was the same way in that, we'd be driving and she'd say, wow, look at those flowers or look at those trees. Isn't that amazingly beautiful? So even coming from a place of already feeling grateful, to be able to really learn how to really master your emotions in a way to be able to understand them, and then to be able to somewhat bridle them. And I don't mean hold them back, but hold them back long enough that you can examine them and be able to understand where they're coming from. Next module is mastering relationships. My husband right now is going through EMF, and I can't even begin to tell you the difference it's made in our relationship.
In 40 years, no less, right?
Yeah, 40 years. We'll be married 40 years, March 19th. It's crazy. Yeah, just the growth that's occurred. And, we don't have time to talk about all the archetypes, but because of situations in my younger childhood, I think I was very much born more of a lover, but I think I became a warrior. I wanted to protect myself, and I was not going to let a man tell me, my real dad is a little cuckoo cuckoo. But anyway, so I think I grew into that position of having to maintain control and not letting somebody run over me. And that's not a pleasant place, and certainly doesn't create balance in a relationship. And he came from a family where it was avoid confrontation at all cost. So you can imagine the two of those coming together, him always wanting to try and fix and just smooth things, and me saying, no, let's talk about it. We got to work this out. And it's kind of like whatever you say kind of thing. So for me to be able to learn how to be a better listener, how to be wrong, how to be okay with being wrong, or more importantly, to recognize there's no right and wrong in this. I feel this way. He feels the other way. Let's balance it out, And so that relationship, he has much more of a voice as he has learned how to speak his piece. And, one of the things I've said about EMF, when people ask me about it and I try and explain it to them, the way that I've explained it the best is that I feel like as I've gone along, as I went with every module, I felt like I was taking another brick off my shoulders. It's like I went along and it's like, oh, there goes that heaviness that I wasn't really sure that I felt. And at the end of the process, I felt like this light, invigorated person. And, and I still go back through every day I go back through some of the principles as I do like a spiritual study, my religious study, and then I study these principles, which so many of them are intertwined anyway. But yeah, it's changed my life in so many ways. I can't even, and developing that self-love, not beating myself up for not being a perfect mother, not being a perfect wife. I've just recognized that I'm not going to reach perfection in this life, and that's okay. We do the best we can.
Yep.
And I'm okay with this person that I look at in the mirror
That's
every day
awesome.
now.
I found that one of the greatest things that I was able to do for me, this idea is captured in a quote by Alvin Toffler. He's a futurist, wrote the book Future Shock.
Mhm.
But he said that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write. They'll be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I feel like that whole process of all the 14 modules that you talked about was a process of me learning why I am who I am,
Mhm.
unlearning, right, what doesn't work for me, and relearning what actually does work for me, right?
Mhm.
Rather than just chasing my tail and running on, this track of a broken record where I just keep repeating the same mistakes, I can then learn from what didn't work out, and then it no longer becomes a mistake. It becomes a learning opportunity.
Mhm. Exactly. Exactly. Which is the whole point. It's the
Yeah.
whole becoming point is wherever we're at, learning from what's going on, learning from, and then just, moving forward. I can't even really list all of the things I've learned and the ways that it's really, I can say for sure it's done nothing but improve my life. And in the beginning, to be honest, in the very beginning, when I was in like module 1, module 2, I was kind of like, is this gonna challenge my faith? Is this gonna really challenge my religious, beliefs?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a heart person anyway. I go a lot from the heart. And felt very validated through this program and that, which was really awesome too. But praying about it, really the answer I got was continue on, move
Nice.
forward. And in doing so, it has changed my relationship with God, Jesus Christ. It has changed the way I view some of the things in my religious, beliefs and in the church in general. But it has done nothing but enhance, I think, my testimony and elevated it in a different way that
Mm.
is very grounded. And I think much more grounded than it was before. And I think part of the reason for that is because the whys now have answers, and I don't do things just because. There's got to be a reason behind why I'm doing the things I'm doing, and they should be things that propel me forward and that are service in nature to help others move along the path in the way that they want to.
Yeah.
And I've always been full of love. I think I was just born that way as a little lover girl, but I think part of it is too that um I do have that desire, like we all do, to serve and contribute. And so people have different paths that they want to be on in order to move forward. And I love being a part of that process in whatever way, they want to move forward.
That's fantastic. And if people want to be able to reach out to you and they want to learn more about your coaching and how they can get benefit, what would be the best way for them to reach you?
They could either reach me via phone, which is, I can give you my phone number, 360-301-1261. Or if they want to reach out to me, at probably my email would be best they can either do Believe Effect, or they can do CLS2366@gmail.com. Yeah, and anytime they reach out me via email, I'll get right back to them too. They can text. I'm pretty, living my busy life, so I just get back as soon as I can. But I'm pretty good about getting back to people. Happy to answer questions, explain EMF more, and you're a good person for that too. But I'm a certified trainer, so I can help kind of send them on that path if they're interested.
Yep. Yeah, I'm just a nerd. I've loved philosophy for a long time. I've certainly helped coach people. I've helped augment people's place in the world
Mhm.
by helping them really examine what it is that they want, why are they running the the programs that they are, and interestingly enough, before I even found Peter Sage or EMF, I was working at the pediatric hospital here at the University of Utah. The chair of pediatrics himself sent me an email in the heart of the pandemic. Said, Joshua, if you had a superpower, it's giving meaningful feedback and encouragement to others. It's like, well, how do I utilize this superpower for its best purpose? And by, kind of thinking that, and then also creating my highest ideal of goodness, of which I can conceive, within 13 months of me creating. So I created it as a testimonial, actually. And, because I had about 7 different editorials and letters to the editor published in the 2 largest newspapers here in Utah, the Salt Lake Tribune and the Deseret News. Then I created an editorial format because I felt like I kind of excelled at that, and so that was my testimonial. Started off with a powerful quote, which was also from Richard Feynman, and then I ended with a powerful quote, which was from Niels Bohr. And and I think that this is something that you'll probably appreciate, the quote from Niels Bohr, and it's probably something that has helped you find a higher truth and a higher connection to God. But it's so Niels Bohr, I don't know if you know, he actually used to go back and forth with Einstein all the time. So a guy who was a part of the Manhattan Project, this Danish quantum physicist. But he says the opposite of a correct statement is a false statement, but the opposite of a profound truth may well be another profound truth. Right? 3rd grade mathematics isn't somehow invalid because 4th grade mathematics built upon it. Algebra is not invalid because calculus is more advanced, right? And so I really love that, and I love that idea that hey, we can invite things into our lives that at once seems like itself doesn't follow the same path, but it doesn't mean it's not the way to go.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And so within 13 months of me creating the highest ideal of goodness, right, which was Gandalf, but not Gandalf just fighting these demons, but Gandalf, helping communities heal by just being around people who love life, who love to share, in the beauty of life, who love to, just be around people and make them feel, blessed and walk away feeling like a better person. And somebody who's, he's a wizard, so he's got magic. And 13 months after creating that testimonial and then reading it off, to the LDS church, who, I'm not a member, they still allowed me to go and do that. 13 months later, I'm graduating EMF, getting this wizardly knowledge, and I'm graduating Ed Stracher's Healing Genius, actually learning the power how to heal. So, we spoke, right? The world came out from God speaking. Well, if we are all God, well, when you get the idea of a torus, well, the mouth is certainly a torus. And then if you look even further, well, the birth canal is absolutely a torus. That's where, with the birth canal, that's where I really feel like if there were the God and the way in which people kind of attribute the idea of a God, me personally, I feel like it's much more feminine energy because that source of creation.
Well, it takes 2 to bring that little baby forth, though. So I think there's got to be a pair involved in it. There's got to be a partnership or a companionship in it. Somehow. That's the way I always, think of it. I think the best comes out of 2 people many times when they're working together for the good of the whole.
I like that. I like that a lot. And so any final thoughts as we wrap this up?
I would just say, one of the things that we were talking about was just the opportunity we have to love ourselves and to love others. And I think we all have the capacity for that. And I think really, and we do a lot of study of this, as in EMF, but I think listening to your heart, truly trying to tune into your heart and quieting the noise of your mind, that it's not your heart that's telling you you're not enough, you're not a good person, you didn't try hard enough. It's all those messages that you get in your head. So if you can find a way through meditation, through walks, through nature, For me, attending, the LDS temple really does that. It's a very soulless, very serene, very peaceful place. Find a place that you can tune into your heart and see what your heart is feeling and what your heart has to say, because I think that's the truest conduit that we have to God, is listening to that heart message.
I'd agree. I agree with that. I think that's a wonderful place to stop. And again, thank you so much for joining me, Cheri. This has been a lot of fun. You definitely have a lot of great wisdom, and I can see why people will come to you for coaching, because you're, one, so reasonable, but two, you're less interested in being like, hey, listen to me, I'm right, and more interested in like, hey, what's your heart saying? How do we get you there? What's the best way forward that benefits you? And what a wonderful thing to have from a coach, that, that ability to realize that that strength and that purpose comes from within. And that coach is what nurtures that, and what waters that, and what feeds that. So then we can become, right, the best version of ourselves. And I like that a whole lot.
Absolutely. And I just think it's important to remember, it's in you. You've got, it's not anything you're going to get from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
You may have people help you bring it up, but we all have it inside of us to be our very best self. Thanks for having me. It was awesome.
Yeah, I really appreciated this. And then, maybe we can have another one sometime in the future.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I love this. Well, thank you again so much, Cheri. I'll make sure that I get your information, your email, on the details of this video, so people can reach out to you if they have questions.
Okay.
Sound good?
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Josh. Have a great day.
Hey, you as well.